All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Hydroponics 101, a beginner's guide for extension agents. I'm here with Bob Hochmuth with the University of Florida and Wanda Laughlin, also with the University of Florida. This is a kind of a professional development webinar series we put together. It's part of a project we're a part of called GRACE, which is Green Reimagining of Agriculture in Controlled Environments. And this is funded through a USDA NIFA SAS project. The GRACE program's kind of overall goal is to reduce, carbon use in controlled environment agriculture systems or greenhouses. And it's a multi-state project with Auburn, University of Florida, Michigan State, and Tuskegee University. And when we talk about reducing carbon, you can also think of that as sort of reducing energy. Energy is a big component of greenhouse production. It's the second highest cost just behind labor. These fans that these greenhouses use burn 30 kilowatts a day, and a heater on a 30 by 96 greenhouse could be anywhere from $1,000 to $6,000 a year in gas cost. So this grant really hopes to reduce some energy use and improve the costs associated with growing greenhouse vegetables. It's a really big project. We've got folks working, doing a lot of modeling, trying to determine what's the best greenhouse design for the Southeast. We've got folks working on breeding. Actually, Dr. Kim's on the webinar he's breeding, trying to breed cold tolerance into tomatoes so we can reduce our heating needs. We've got individuals working on kind of virtual augmented reality gaming systems to educate high school students about hydroponics and greenhouse vegetable production. So a lot's going on with this project. Bob and Wanda and I are working on the extension component, and that part of that has a extension agent training component to it. And, that's why we did this series. So we've got several upcoming webinar series. These are all in that flyer I sent you. They should be in your calendar. If you registered early for this, the June date may have said June 19th, and that was an oversight on my part. I forgot about the national holiday. So just double check your calendar and make sure it's on the June 20th block instead of June 19th. So these are the webinars we have coming up over the next 6 months, and we hope to probably expand this to future webinars, kind of depending on the feedback we get from you. And this is some of the topics we've discussed doing in those future webinars, even breaking it into, smaller, hydroponic systems. I know there's a lot of 4-H agents on, how this might also for master gardeners. So there's a lot of different things we can do with this, and we're really excited about where this may go. So today we're just kind of really providing just a kind of real big overview of the greenhouse vegetable industry. So I'm going to give you an overview of what that looks like. And then towards the end of the latter part of the webinar, Bob Hochmuth out of Florida is going to talk about what's going on in Florida, an overview of protected agriculture industry in Florida. Florida, I would say, would be leading the region, and in many ways probably leading the nation in protected agriculture. They have been doing it a long time down there and have a lot of neat stuff going on. So let's just dive into what is hydroponics. And hydroponics is the soilless production of plants. So we don't need soil to grow plants. The soil just basically acts as a reservoir for nutrients. We really just need that soil solution, what's in that water. So the soil holds the plants upright and kind of holds that nutrient solution for us. So we can recreate that nutrient solution and optimize it for production. And it's all about optimization when we're talking about hydroponics or greenhouse vegetables, because we want to optimize the growing conditions for these plants because it's expensive. All these systems and greenhouses cost a lot of money. So we want to get the most yield we can per area so we reach a return on investment as quickly as possible. So hydroponics, there's a lot of different words and jargon you may hear associated with that. We already went over hydroponics. You may hear it called soilless culture, and a lot of times people refer into hydroponics where it's grown in some sort of non-mineral soil, like a compost, an aggregate like perlite or pine bark. Greenhouse vegetable production is kind of all encompassing. As is protected culture, you may grow hydroponically in protected culture and you may not. The big catchphrase out there right now is controlled environment agriculture, or CEA. And also vertical farming is also becoming more popular. However, we're still learning a lot about that and whether it is viable here in the Southeast. There's a lot of different things you can do with hydroponics. You can grow almost anything hydroponically, but really you got to ask yourself, should I? I've grown sweet potatoes in a greenhouse and sweet corn, and I didn't make any money on that. And it's not very surprising. So there's some crops that you can grow in a greenhouse, but you shouldn't because you're not going to make money on them. And so I would say the top crops out there are always going to be tomato, lettuce, cucumbers, peppers. There's just a handful that are more likely to make money. Now there's some other odd crops out there that can also, you can have a successful crop and a successful business off of, but these are the main ones. And you can kind of divide these into two main groups. Leafy greens, which would be like lettuce, and then your vine or fruiting crops, which would be like tomatoes or cucumbers or peppers. So within vine crops, tomato production, like I said, that's the most popular around the world. It can be media-based, or that soilless culture I was talking about earlier, where you're growing in perlite, pine bark, or rock wool. That's probably the most common you'll see, especially in the Southeast. It can also be true hydroponics, where you're just growing in a nutrient solution. And these plants are going to be grown vertically. Again, we're trying to maximize production per area. So we're trying to fit as many plants as we can in a greenhouse. And that's why we grow these tomato plants vertically on strings. We'll probably have a little over 3 square feet per plant. And on an average 30 by 96 greenhouse, that's about 2,800 square feet. You're going to have about 660 tomato plants in there. And we're able to do this, grow them vertically through what's called like a trellis system. So a trellis system involves running steel cables or metal cables down the length of the greenhouse. And so these steel cables, from them, there's going to be some spools with string attached, and we're training those tomato plants on that string. And this needs to be a pretty robust trellis. You can't use your greenhouse frame unless it's specifically designed for that. And we'll go into a lot of details on this in future webinars where we really dive in deep on some of the culture techniques for these different crops. As far as training those tomatoes, we're going to be training these to a central leader, or we're trying to make these into a vine. We don't want a bush. So we're going to remove all the suckers, and we're going to attach that plant to the string I talked about earlier using tomato clips, or we're going to wrap the string around the vine. And so really we're just looking for that one single leader. In greenhouse production, we're going to be using indeterminate tomatoes. And so that means that tomato will grow indefinitely until something kills it, right? So that tomato is going to grow, and eventually it's going to reach that trellis wire. And when it does, we don't have to stop the crop. In fact, we want to keep the crop growing as long as we can, so we can, again, maximize that yield per area. And so once it reaches that trellis cable, we can unwind a little bit of that string from that spool I was talking about and slide the spool down that trellis wire. And we do that as a tomato plant grows. And so eventually you get this kind of a L or S shaped, and you might have a 20-foot long tomato plant by the end of the season. And that just allows us to continue the season as long as we can. Another great crop, and Bob's going to talk a little bit about this in a minute, would be cucumbers. We're growing more of the gourmet cucumbers or the seedless cucumbers. They're about the same density as tomatoes. They grow very quick. Some folks will do 3 100-day crops a year. You got to pick them. You got to pick them daily. They grow extremely fast. This is just 42 days after we transplanted. They are trellised a little and trained a little bit differently. And again, we'll go over the details of this in a future webinar. And so leafy green production is, we're basically growing these, horizontally on a flat surface. And when I mean leafy greens, that could be herbs, leaf lettuce, other type of greens that work well in this system. And mainly we're talking about lettuce. but we're not really going to be growing any sort of iceberg or heading type lettuce or large heart, romaine. We're going to be growing leaf and bib type lettuce. And that's really because they have a very short crop cycle. It's probably about 30 to 35 days from transplant. So we're going to put a transplant into the system. We're not sowing season it directly. And we really want to try to, like I said, maximize our yield per area. We want to try to turn that greenhouse over as many times as possible. And so on a standard 30 by 96 greenhouse, we can fit over 4,000 heads of lettuce in there easily. And typically people will break that into quarters or quadrants. So they're planting a quarter of it every week, and that means they're harvesting a quarter of it every week. And you can typically harvest about 1,200 heads of lettuce if everything goes right every week from that greenhouse. It's a lot of lettuce produced in these type of systems. And there's two major cropping systems with lettuce production, or any leafy green really. We have raft culture or deep water culture, and then nutrient film technique. So nutrient film technique is where we're growing in plastic gutters or troughs. They're made out of PVC. And each trough has a drip tube that goes to it, and it's going to be pushing a thin film of water through that trough all day long. The trough does not fill up with water. We just have that thin film. We need that oxygen in the trough and that humid airspace for the plants to grow. Once the water enters the trough, it runs to the end of it. Then it drops into a pipe that takes it to a collection sump where it's pumped and recirculated back into the system. So this is a recirculating type system. What's real neat in a lot of the medium to larger size systems, the nutrition is monitored with a controller or a computer. So before it goes back to the plants, it runs through some sensors, and the controller will adjust the fertilizer if needed. It can also adjust the pH. If the pH drops, it can add a base, or you can have it set up to add an acid if the pH is going up. These are kind of expensive systems, NFT systems, but they're probably the cleanest, and with all the food safety stuff, there's some very big advantages to it over the next system I'm going to talk about, which is the deep water or raft cultures type systems. In these type of systems, we're basically just floating plants on top of a nutrient solution using a foam raft. It's probably about a third of the cost of an NFT system, and it's really scalable. You can do this just about on any scale you'd like. It could be very small. You can do this in a Rubbermaid tote or igloo cooler, or you can do it as big as you want in a greenhouse. I did say, this is cheaper, but there is some cons to it. One would be it's a little messier. You can get algae growing on these rafts. They can be difficult to clean. And then you have to be very careful when you're harvesting them not to drip that nutrient solution and potentially spread any pathogens onto the crop at harvest. There's all kinds of levels of sophistication with this. There's some very simple soulless culture techniques out there. And Bob's going to talk a little bit about that today, and then more in a future webinar about some of these systems. And some of these don't even need to be in a greenhouse. They can be seasonal outdoors, just about on any scale. And there's very advanced systems out there. The Dutch are the #1 greenhouse growers in the world. They produce the highest yield per area out of anyone. They have it dialed in to a formula or a recipe book. Everything is tightly monitored and optimized in these greenhouses. The Dutch style greenhouses are the Venlo structures. They're about 30 feet tall at the sidewall or the eave of the greenhouse. They're designed primarily for northern latitudes, and we're still trying to see how far south we can go with these. There are some operations in the southeast, but the jury's still out on how successful they are with growing some of these greenhouse vegetable crops in the heat we have here. Again, they're designed for more northern latitudes. Everything in them is balanced. They're injecting CO2 into the atmosphere inside the greenhouse. They're using supplemental lighting. They have very advanced heating systems. It's a very dialed in type of system. In the southeast, most of our greenhouse production is going to take place in a greenhouse that's covered with poly or plastic. They're most often going to have a Quonset style roof or a hoop style roof with a sidewall. Uh, really, from what I've learned, the taller the house, the better in terms of dealing with heat in the summer. Some of these houses are going to have fans and cooling pads, evaporative cooling pads, and we'll talk more about that later. But these are different ways to vent and cool a greenhouse. And depending where you are, you may just rely on natural ventilation or wind to cool your greenhouse with open sides. And in some cases, growers will use both. They'll use the natural ventilation in the summer, and then in the winter they may switch over to fans, just depending on what their environmental conditions are. So how does this look on like a global scale, global production of greenhouse crops? It's a pretty big industry. As of 2019, they estimated about 1.2 million acres in protected culture vegetables. Now, not all of that is hydroponics. A lot of that is just protected culture, with plants growing in the ground. Now, these numbers were from statistics that were gathered from different countries. Now, in 2024, they used satellite imaging and an computer algorithm to determine how many acres were covered or used in protective culture. And through that, they found there was 3.2 million acres. And a lot of that takes place in China, about 60% of it. They use a lot of low-tech greenhouses there, almost like our high tunnels. They're just a little bit different. But there's a ton of production in China, a ton of production in Almeria, Spain. And you can see how it goes down the list. A lot of protected culture in Mexico. And a lot of these countries are interested in this because we have increase in populations. They're predicting 9.3 billion people by 2050. And, resources are becoming more limited or more expensive, and you just get a lot more yield in a greenhouse. If I'm growing hydroponically, I can get anywhere from 5 to 20 times the yield growing indoors hydroponically versus growing outdoors conventionally. That it's not relying on soil type. I can put this in a abandoned Kmart parking lot on top of a roof on the side of a mountain because I'm not really relying on soil. It's very efficient with water use and nutrient use. I'm using a lot of water per area, but I'm also producing a lot more product per area. So it's very efficient. But all this comes at sort of a cost. It is a much more expensive production type systems. You've got a lot of labor involved in these. You're paying for a lot of energy in some situations, and you have a big capital investment also. So it is great, and I want to sing its praises, but it doesn't fit every situation. It's really kind of dependent on the area, dependent on the market. And there's several other things that, need to be considered before just jumping right in to this type of production. You may have noticed on my list of rankings that the U.S. wasn't in the top greenhouse producing countries. And that's because, we're not. We produce about 2,500 acres of greenhouse vegetables in the U.S. About 75% of that is in tomatoes. And you may ask yourself, we're an agriculture producing country, big exporter of agriculture. So why are we so low? And that's because we're highly productive at growing conventionally. We have very big agricultural powerhouse states like California, Texas, Florida. We have an extensive and efficient interstate system to move that product efficiently through the country. We have plenty of arable, great farmland all over the country, plenty of natural resources. So we grow very successfully conventionally. So there hasn't been a big need for us to adopt this. We also take part in the North America Free Trade Agreement. And, a lot of produce is coming out of Mexico and Canada. And in 2015, I thought this was very interesting. 60% of the tomatoes consumed in the U.S., fresh tomatoes, were produced in Mexico and Canada. And most of that was grown in greenhouses. So it is a growing industry in the U.S. You can see most of the acreage is owned by large companies or corporations. And it has dramatically increased in the last 10 years. In 2012, the Ag Census reported about 5,200 operations in the U.S. And in 2002, it doubled to about 1,100 operations. Now, I don't know if the NRCS high tunnel equip program is in this calculation, because that would definitely contribute to a lot of operations. But nevertheless, it's still a big growing industry in the U.S. And there's a couple of different ways you can go about doing it, a couple of different markets. You got the wholesale market and you have a direct market. And most small farms are really going to be focused on that direct market because they have a lower volume. They're looking for a greater price. They're trying to take advantage of the buy local movement. And it's really important for these to be within a pretty close proximity to the market, especially near cities. It can be a little difficult to make a living doing this or have a successful enterprise if you're in a real rural area and you don't have a market nearby. You have to have enough product being moved to justify the transportation cost to take this product somewhere. Also, the smaller operations have a much lower efficiency in terms of energy and labor. The bigger you are, the economy of scale has a big influence here. And the bigger you are, the more efficient typically you're going to be with labor and energy. You can afford the more expensive but more efficient heating type systems, and your labor is just more efficient when you're able to spread it across a bigger area. On the wholesale side of things, you're going to have medium to large operations. They're going to be getting a lower price, but they're going to be putting out a lot more volume. And this can be a little bit more successful in a rural area because you're going to have a lot more volume to move out to justify those transportation costs. And we're going to talk in one of the future webinars about the economics of this and go into a little bit more about the markets and how that works. But it's just really important that if you're talking to your clients, that you don't, they don't just jump in, head first. And don't be this guy. This guy was me. This is in, I think, 2011, and I'm throwing away about $2,000 worth of lettuce when I had a guy tell me, I'll buy everything you grow. And then he didn't, and so I had to find something to do with it. But it's really important that your clients, if they're interested in this, that they have a good plan in place. They understand the cost associated with it. And I really hope that we're able to get some of that out to you through this webinar series. I know I talked really fast, but I was trying to cram a lot in there. And now I'm going to turn it over to Bob Hochmuth with University of Florida, and he's going to tell us about the protective ag industry and what's going on there in Florida. Bob, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Jeremy. Is that coming through okay?
Looks great.
All right. I'll carry on from here then. Great introduction here. Just a couple of comments here before I get started here and telling you a little bit about the Florida story. Congratulations, Jeremy, for putting this idea together. This is Jeremy's idea, and we're happy to go along for the ride here with Jeremy. And as we watch the registrations over the last couple of weeks here, at least for myself, I'm really, really happy and excited about the number of people. I think we ended up somewhere around 150 here before today's session. So we're really happy to be able to provide this for extension agents. We realize that a lot of you are commercial ag agents and others that are more working with home horticulture and youth and so forth. And we hope that over the course of all of these, that there's something in here for all of you. I have found over my career that this has been a very popular extension program topic, and I think it's partly because it's unique and you can become an expert in your community on this particular topic. I'm located at the North Florida Research and Education Center, Swanee Valley, which is just outside of Live Oak, and this is sort of an aerial shot of our footprint. At least it's the aerial shot of our footprint before Helene came through, and we did sustain a lot of damage and are in the process of rebuilding a lot of that. So we've sort of had a temporary hold on some of our programming over the course of the winter, but we've got at least one greenhouse and a couple of the tunnels back up and running here now. So we're back online. The first one of these structures was built back in 1989, so we've been at this for a number of years and just sort of thrilled to be able to see so much interest continuing in this area. At our unit here at the University of Florida, we have conducted a wide range of research over the years, but our specialty, I would say, has been more on the training and extension side of things. So we tend to have a lot of different crops and a lot of different systems going at one time so that we can include all of those in our training programs. I will mention that this grant also has some funding dedicated for an in-service training that we intend to host here at Live Oak in March of 2026. So kind of keep an eye out on that, and we'll be sharing that information. It'll be an in-service training for extension agents, but a wide range of research and extension opportunities here at our facility over the years. I think one of the things that we've learned a lot about over the years is working closely with our commercial farmers and sharing information back and forth, and each of us learning from each other. The growers have an awful lot of ingenuity and expertise, and certainly we've been able to learn and improve our programs as a result of having these close relationships. I think from an extension agent standpoint, if you do have commercial operations in your area, and you might not be comfortable initially, just try to take small steps and begin to work with those growers, get to know them, and them get to know you, and provide opportunities where it's appropriate. But I think having the opportunity to work with growers has been a special treat for us over the years. If you look at what's happened here in the state of Florida, it does resemble the information that Jeremy put up a little bit ago worldwide. And if you go back when we first started tracking the industry here in Florida for several years, up until 2001, we were less than 100 acres of greenhouse vegetables overall in the entire state. And then we realized that things began to change. And by 2010 or 11, we knew we wanted to do a survey, and we've collected most of that data in the year 2013. Have not had a chance to formally update that survey, but I'm going to show you how we've sort of guesstimated where that industry is based on our contacts within the state of Florida. So we know that from a vegetable standpoint, we're over 500 acres. And I would say that this trend that you see on the table here is continuing to grow. And how much over 500 acres we are currently, I don't know exactly, but I feel very comfortable with well over 500 acres of commercial greenhouse vegetables or protected ag vegetables. Some of that would be under tunnels, some of it would be under shade, some of it would be in greenhouses. And you see down below sort of the footnotes there that it used to be, if you go back around 1990, that was mostly tomatoes, a little bit of cucumbers, and a very little bit of lettuce. But then things have really changed now. And in fact, here in the state of Florida, tomatoes are not the number one crop by any means. And largely due to the difficulty of growing tomatoes here in Florida with the environmental conditions and whitefly vectored viruses, just a couple of examples of what makes it really challenging. In fact, I'm sure over my career, I've talked a lot more people out of growing tomatoes than I have into growing tomatoes here in Florida. But there's a lot of changes that have occurred over that period of time. We began to see protected culture in some of the fruit crops, blueberries, for instance, that began a decade or so ago. So if we look at both fruits and vegetables, and the herbs are going to be included in the vegetable category, that we currently have at least 500 acres of each of those, so 1,000 acres of protected culture. And this does not include the transplant industry, the fern industry, and the rest of it that is also under protected culture. This would just be for those crops that are edible crops, fruits and vegetables. And I'm sure that this trend is going to be continuing, at least in the short term. If we look at the operations that we have here in Florida, there actually are only a very few that are large scale operations, and I arbitrarily have chosen 5 acres or more to be those that are large scale. So if we take 350 or 400 operations here in Florida, you're going to have probably no more than 10 or 20 at the most that are large scale of 5 acres or more. So for the most part, we have operations that look a lot more like this, really diversified, different crops, different production systems, and mostly geared to retail direct markets in close by urban areas where the prices can be higher on a retail marketing situation. Over the years, the tomato industry, just to make a couple comments about specific crops, it used to be that if you talked about tomatoes and a greenhouse tomato, you were talking about a beefsteak tomato, and there was very little else in the tomato world for greenhouses that would be included in that. But today, it's very different than that. There still are some beefsteak operations here, but for the most part, we're seeing a lot more of these highly specialized types of tomatoes that are being grown more so than the standard beefsteak tomatoes. A lot of times these are harder to grow. Some of the times they like these grape tomatoes, the plant itself is just much more difficult to manage than a standard beefsteak. But the tomato industry, needless to say, my point here is that it's changed dramatically over the last 25 or 30 years. Peppers would be another crop that we didn't see very much of in the early days here, but we begin to see a lot more of it now. The colored bell pepper fits a lot better into the greenhouses, and it's really difficult to grow colored bell peppers out in the field. So that last couple of weeks when it goes from a green immature pepper to a mature colored pepper, whether it's going to end up being orange, yellow, or red, that is the period of time when those peppers become highly perishable. And so it's difficult out in the field with the weather and diseases and things like that to be able to grow them equally as well. So the colored bell peppers fit in a lot better inside our greenhouse operations. We have learned over the years to be able to grow peppers under shade over the summertime here. That's one of the challenges that we have in Florida, is that there's an opportunity to still have a marketplace, but what are the things that we can grow over the summer and how do we grow them? And oftentimes it's things like open shade structures, just to take a little bit of that solar energy pressure off. And a crop like peppers, you'll see on the left-hand side of this picture, those pepper plants are say 8 feet tall, 7 feet tall. And when you take that extra sunlight energy off of them, they'll continue to grow in the summertime here, all the way from March until November or December, until we finally get a killing frost that would take it out. It might be that you could take them to a little bit of color, but for the most part, this is just another way to be able to grow green immature bell peppers during that period of time over the course of the year. As Jeremy mentioned, the cucumbers are another one. Used to be that they would only be those 10, 12-inch cucumbers that had to be shrink wrapped. Now with these mini cucumbers, they have a lot of the same attributes, but they don't need to be shrink wrapped for local retail sales. So they still have a thin skin, not quite as thin as the original European seedless or burpless cucumbers, but have all of the rest of the same attributes. So we're seeing them as being a lot more popular, especially in direct market sales. Lettuce and other leafy greens that's where a lot of the action has been in the last 10 years. This is, in my mind, clearly the area of most interest and most increase in terms of any single crop or crop group would be in this lettuce and leafy green vegetables. And all different kinds of lettuces, different colors, different textures that can be made available. Just want to share just one specific example. We have many of them, but I just thought I'd highlight this particular one. When we try to meet the needs of our growers, the growers are indicating that they need something to be able to do if there is anything over the summertime, even if it's a loss leader, because it does become expensive to try to cool these greenhouses. But we have high humidity and high temperatures over the summer. And so on the left-hand side, you see 5 different things that we evaluated here: shading systems, reducing the electrical conductivity over the hottest part of the year, and then using a chiller to reduce the temperature of the nutrient solution in an NFT system. Our lettuce breeder, Dr. Herman Sandoya, has been working with us to help to select cultivars that are really well adapted. And that might mean, in particular, it's going to be less likely to bolt and less likely to have tip burn. So we've included post-harvest information on this and sort of evaluation of bitterness and a number of other factors to be able to go through there. And I think the main thing of all of those is probably this chilling unit to bring the solution temperatures down over the summer. Inside the greenhouse in this particular picture here, the temperature was probably well over 100 degrees, maybe as high as 110 or 115 degrees. But as long as we can keep the solution temperature down to the low to mid 70s, we can still continue to grow high quality lettuce if we choose the right variety and follow those other procedures all the way through the summer. And as an extension agent, this is the what we're really after here. And when we have a grower that works with us through this process and then successfully implements what we've been working on, and this is an example of that particular situation where now this grower is offering lettuce locally 12 months of the year, even through the hottest, humidest part of the summer. These other specialty crops that we'll be digging into a little bit deeper as we get through these future webinars, herbs and microgreens, edible flowers, all of those. If you put all those together, there's as much acreage of them in Florida, if not more, than tomatoes. So we just see this increase in specialty crops, including those that you see in front of you here, especially for local sales. We do have a lot of urban centers here in Florida, and that's where you have the greatest opportunity, where the prices can be higher and access to those clientele customers that are willing to pay a little bit more for some of these highly specialized things. There's also interest in aquaponics and organic systems, and so we are working with farmers that are using those kinds of systems. And so I don't want to not mention this. There is a relatively small footprint in both of these, but these are both also part of our overall system. We recently were able to have an opportunity to put in an indoor container system. This happens to be a freight farm on an energy-related grant, and so we've been learning about this particular system over the last 3 years, and we'll be working with lettuce varieties out of Dr. Sandoya's breeding program. That will be our next target research project in this particular system. So Wanda Laughlin manages the greenhouses, all of our protected agriculture here, and many of you have probably met Wanda over the years, and we're really, really fortunate to have someone with her talent and interest in this particular area that drives our ability to do these programs here. Just finish up with a couple of things just to let you know that there's a number of other programs that we offer. And this is our Protected Ag series as part of our Small Farms Academy. And again, I mentioned that the greenhouse part is sort of on hold right now, but we will get this rolling back again. And you see on the right-hand side a number of different topics. These typically are one-day classes that are going to be intensively targeting one of those details there, whether it's transplant production or nutrient management, whatever the topic might happen to be. And that's part of our Small Farms Academy program. The last one here is a program that we began in 2021, and this is an online, more intensive type of program. It's a 4-week course that digs in a little bit deeper. So I think if you look at the webinar, what we're intending to do here is scratch the surface a little bit. This class might be something that you're interested in. It's offered both in English and in Spanish, and is offered worldwide. So this has been a pretty cool project for us to be involved with as well. So with that, Jeremy, that concludes my part of the presentation. I'm just looking forward to having some questions if there are any, and I'll turn it back to you. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Bob. We'll open it up for questions, and I'm also going to go ahead and launch a poll. You guys are all extension folks, and you know we got to do some evaluation for reporting. So if you wouldn't mind, fill out the poll, and we'll open it up to questions. We'll go ahead and launch that. I realize we didn't go into a lot of specifics, so you may be holding your questions until we do in future webinars. But anyway, we can help you. We're glad to.
And I would just add to that. I think, Jeremy, if you look at this for a half an hour, 40-minute presentation. Our intention here is just to kind of give you an idea of who we are and what we've got going on. And over the course of the upcoming webinars, we'll be able to get into a lot more detail on specific topics. So we want to be here to serve your needs and certainly have you reach out to us and let us know any follow-up questions, anything like that that you might need as we go forward.
We have a question in the chat box that says, what are the biggest challenges for starting growers? You want to handle that, Bob?
I'll be glad to give that a try. I would say that the biggest challenge in looking at over my career about getting growers started is that they love the production system, and then on a commercial basis, it's that they are not fully aware and don't pay enough attention to the importance of marketing. And so having a market plan, what you're gonna grow, what you're gonna sell, where you're gonna sell it, and at what price are you gonna sell it. I think it for me, we can have a pretty average grower who is a very talented marketer and be very successful. The other way, having somebody who is a very good grower but does not understand the marketing part are doomed for failure very quickly, because this is not a inexpensive proposition. So I think the biggest challenge for a beginning grower to be successful is involved with the marketing. And I like Jeremy's slide about that where he had to pick up truckload of lettuce that he was going to give away because the guy said that he would he would sell whatever Jeremy could give him. And my story is that oftentimes we hear the guy down at the corner saying, "I'll take everything that you grow," and that's exactly what they're going to do. So it's I think it's more about marketing than it is on the production side. It is a type of deal where people just get all excited about this kind of way of growing things. The technology is there, but I think it's on the marketing side. If I were forced to answer it on the production side, I would say that oftentimes people try to improve what's already out there. They try to get some gimmicky thing that they feel like they've got the right answer to it. And it's amazing how many times those situations happen and fall flat on their face. So I would say the other thing is stick to what's proven, and utilize the information that's available to you. I think both Auburn and the University of Florida have excellent publications and information. We have it on our EDIS system, EDIS, .afas.ufl.edu, and we can put that in future contacts. But there's at least 50 publications, and a lot of it is geared to beginning operations. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'll just echo what you said, Bob. There's a lot of folks that I've had the pleasure of dealing with that wanted to reinvent the wheel, and yeah, I've seen a lot of things go south pretty quick with that. And it's so neat and novel. It just grabs your attention. But you start talking about the numbers, a lot of people, they don't pay attention to the cost associated with it. We did get a question about what about bok choy type leafy greens instead of lettuce? I feel like we need higher nutrient leafy greens. Bob, have you grown bok choy in your systems?
We have, and it would be a good alternative if you're interested in doing that on a small scale. I think that, I think that's the big thing. Are we talking about a small scale, more of a garden, a demonstration or something like that somebody wants to feed themselves? Or are we talking about a commercial scale operation? And a commercial scale operation, then I'm back to the marketing thing. How much bok choy are you going to be able to sell in comparison to lettuce? So bok choy, that whole Asian vegetable group, I think would be an alternative. In many of our production systems, it would do really, really well. But I think in the marketplace right now, you would only sell a little bit of bok choy, but you'd sell a lot of lettuce.
Oops. Could I unmute for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I'm here in Miami-Dade County. And I think there's a lot of market for the Asian vegetables. There's a lot of awareness of the nutrient contents. They're already kind of touted for being able to withstand more of the hotter climates that we seem to be getting. And I mean, doesn't everybody love Thai? I myself kind of never buy lettuce because I'm not sure if it's contaminated. And it's just no nutritional value. It's kind of like the filler in a sandwich, but I may be biased. So there you go. I like this alternative better than, Soylent Green, that movie of the dystopian future.
Yeah. No, I think that you're almost alluding to the marketing piece of it. Like if you know your market there, and you in Miami-Dade County have a whole different market, market assessment than if we did that same thing here in Live Oak, Florida. So you know what I mean? Knowing the market is very, very important, and the market in Miami is very different than the market in Live Oak. So I think that you could be successful in Miami-Dade with what you're proposing. You might not be very successful at all in Live Oak with that same proposal. I would say that at Dr. Herman Sandoya's lettuce breeding program, one of the things that we've been doing is helping him to select and analyze cultivars that are higher in nutrition, and in particular, a couple of different vitamins. So I'm going to say I can't disagree with the traditional comment that you've made about lettuce, perhaps, but I might challenge that in the future, our University of Florida lettuce breeder is going to change that. He's got some cultivars that do have much higher nutrition value than what we would traditionally think of in some of the lettuces.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions for us?
I think there's maybe one on here about the training that we're doing. I'm not sure if that's or are the trainings you're doing later on in the year, and for in-state participants, is there an online version? I think the answer to those, probably both of those questions, is yes. That if you're talking about what I would mention here in Live Oak, that in-service training is going to be available to not only agents in Florida. It'll be a multi-state offering for extension agents to be able to do that. And then the online version is that maybe the last slide that I gave, that would be the intensive online version of it. So I think that the answer to both of those questions would be yes.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.